William Byron wins his appeal and his points penalty is overturned, and Kevin Harvick is handed major penalties for an L2 infraction. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into this really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start our paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Haley's 2022 Leaf Filter Pink scheme you're going to be seeing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Honestly, good looking paint scheme, in my opinion. I love the pink touch on the car. I like the green version of this car and the white, don't get me wrong, but this one looks really solid, and I'm excited to see it at the Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Harris Teeter Scott scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at the Roval. Decent paint scheme, in my opinion. I think JGG's had some good paint schemes this year and some not so good paint schemes. This one's kind of in the middle, in my opinion. It's decent. It's not the greatest, but hopefully Stenhouse will have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2022 number 45 Root Insurance scheme they'll be seeing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Honestly, decent looking paint scheme, in my opinion. I like that they've updated it a little bit, so it's made it a little bit better for sure. Hopefully Bubba will have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is JJ Yeley's 2022 Connect As Kyle Kara scheme they'll be seeing later this year. Decent paint scheme, in my opinion. Cars look pretty solid, in my opinion. Hopefully JJ Yeley will have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Logano's 2023 Shell Pennzoil scheme that we're going to see next year. Honestly, there's nothing really different about this car. It seems like this is going to be the paint scheme they'll have probably throughout the rest of Joey Logano's career at this point. Nothing's really changed on this paint scheme, so hopefully we'll see him do good next year with this car. This will be the car for 2023, the Shell Pennzoil scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2022 Raze Energy Sour Rainbow scheme they're going to be seeing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. Really good looking paint scheme, in my opinion. I think the colors look really great on this car, and it looks just really colorful. It looks really pretty. Excited to see on the racetrack this weekend at the Roval. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Danny Kvyat's 2022 Nemeko scheme they'll be seeing this weekend in the Xfinity Series race at the Charlotte Roval. Looks pretty good, in my opinion. Very exciting to see that Nemeko is partnering up with Danny Kvyat for both races, the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series races as well. Great partner for them. Good looking paint scheme too, in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Spencer Boyd's 2022 Off the Grid scheme I believe we're going to be seeing at Homestead Miami Speedway in a couple weeks. This paint scheme is okay, in my opinion. It's not fantastic. I think it's okay, but it's good to see Spencer Boyd has a new brand sponsoring him. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brandon Brown's 2022 Top Steer scheme they'll be seeing this weekend at the Charlotte Roval. I love the simplicity of it. I think the colors look good on this car, and I really love the simplicity on Brandon Brown's car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Justin Allgaier's 2022 The Brand Foundation 10-year anniversary scheme they'll be seeing later this year at Homestead Miami Speedway. I love they've changed the colors on this one. Instead of it basically being red and yellow, they've turned it to like a purple looking car, and I think this one looks really good in my opinion, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this one out on the racetrack at Homestead. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Austin Cindric's 2023 Auto Trader scheme that we will see next year. Really excited to see Auto Trader will continue sponsoring Austin Cindric in 2023. Of course, they've been a big partner with the Penske brand for many years. I think it looks really exciting. Looks really cool. And I'm definitely looking forward to see it on the racetrack in 2023. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about HP. As it was announced yesterday, the HP has become an official sponsor of Hendrick Motorsports and a major corporate sponsor of the company as well. HP's been around for many years, and Hendrick finds a way to always pick up these major sponsors and major brands to sponsor the company. So it's very exciting to see that HP's jumping up to the plate and sponsoring the company starting here. I believe this weekend at the Roval, they're going to be sponsoring the company, and they'll probably have bigger initiatives heading into 2023. Really exciting to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Charlotte Road Course purses money for this weekend. Bob Pocker scores every single week. He puts out the purse money for every single NASCAR race that takes place for the top tier events. So for the Cup Series, it's $7,262,080. And for the Xfinity Series, it's $1,319,119. A little bit low for the Cup Xfinity Series, considering we're at a important weekend, which we're in the home track for the weekend. So a little bit surprised money's not a little bit higher for this weekend, considering we're at a hometown track for the weekend. But decent purse money for sure, but not as high as I thought it would be. But it's decent money, at least, for this weekend. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Pocono. As it was announced on Wednesday for the big calling announcement, that Pocono announced they'll be having major renovations to the garage for Pocono ahead of the 2023 weekend for Pocono. Poco's been in talks that they would have some major renovations for the last couple of years, and I think with the increase of attendance they had, with them having their best attendance they've had in years, I think they wanted to get major renovations done. And with the future, with the TV deals and stuff, I think you're going to see a lot of tracks making these moves going forward. Really exciting to definitely see for sure that they've gone ahead and made some announcements. They're going to have some major renovations. It's good to see and happy to see that they are making some overall really, really big moves to get Pocono in really good shape. I think it's really exciting for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Grant Enfinger. As Grant Enfinger is going to drive the 44 in ARCA this weekend in the championship race at Salem Speedway. Now, this 44 car, I believe, is for Jeff McClure Racing, and this car is not associated with the GMS brand, as a GMS Racing spokesperson basically spoke to Mark Crystal and told them that this is going to be the case. Grant Enfinger, I think, will have a really good chance to go out there and win. I know the last time they raced, which I think was last week in Toledo, they ended up falling out of the race, and it's a shame because Landon Huffman was competing for a top 10 finish in that. I think Grant Enfinger will have a shot to win. Yes, I know this car probably isn't the fastest in the world, but I do think Grant Enfinger will have a very, very solid run, and I'm definitely excited to see what Grant Enfinger can do in this car at Salem. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Andrew Abbott. As it was announced on Tuesday that Andrew Abbott has been indefinitely suspended by NASCAR and will be requiring anger management and sensitivity training for something he did during the pre-race festivities. Andrew Abbott has been the crew chief of the 20 truck for Young's Motorsports, and like I said, he will be requiring anger management here and will basically be indefinitely suspended probably for the rest of the year. I don't see him getting basically approved back in the sport. Hope he can get some anger management and control, because again, you can't be basically getting really mad out there and getting really, really upset. I understand him being upset about things, but at the same token, in same time, you got to keep your temper in check and not get really, really upset. That being said, though, I do hope he gets that fixed, and hopefully we will see him not run into any issues, and hopefully he'll be able to get that fixed in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Drive for Diversity. As there were a couple announcements that were announced for the Drive for Diversity. First, Advanced Autoports has become the official sponsor of the Drive for Diversity program, becoming a major, major partner of the company. Then, they announced at the same time, they announced the class for 2023. The 13 people that will be there: Justin Campbell, Quinn Davis, Eloy Falcon, Katie Hettinger, Caleb Johnson, Nathan Lyons, Andre Stillera, Jaden Reyna, Jordan Riddick, Paige Rogers, LeVar Scott, Regina Servant, and Lucas Vera will all be part of this year's Drive for Diversity class. Multiple people have been part of this class for many, many years. Of course, LeVar Scott's been part of the class for a very long time. Regina Servant is someone that we already know. She has been part of the NASCAR Mexico Series, and she's an upcoming driver in the series. Andre Soler has been racing in the ARCA West Series. Nathan Lyons, I recognize that name. I believe he's been competing in IDK's series as well. He does every Night in America, among other things, and it's really good to see Katie Hettinger recognize her name, among other names that are in this series. Congratulations to all these people getting added to the Drive for Diversity class. The class has had some big names come through the ranks, and I think it's really exciting to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Circuit of the Americas. Now, this is something I did not talk about a couple days ago, but it was reported 2 or 3 days ago that Bobby Epstein, who basically is the chairman of COTA, he says that he is no longer interested in selling Circuit of the Americas amid F1's growth in the United States. You look at the growth of F1 in the United States, and there have been a lot of talks and conversations, I think a few years ago, that they were in talks and maybe selling off basically the racetrack and basically selling it and getting rid of Circuit of the Americas. But I also think NASCAR does play a big factor into this as well. I think they're playing a major factor into this, and I think that's another big reason why COTA is sticking around. They have their best attendance they've had in years last year with Formula One, the best attendance in the United States Grand Prix I think has ever had in the history. And I think there's a reason why COTA is going to stick around long term. I don't see COTA going away anytime soon. I know they're under contract for a few years now, but I think they will have a long-term extension coming for the racetrack. It is good to see, though, that COTA is going to be sticking around for the long term. It's really good to see for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Race for the Championship. Now, we do have two big stories to talk about in regards to Race for the Championship, but the first one is that Kyle Busch's move to RCR and Kurt Busch's concussion are among the topics that will be explored in Race for the Championship in the upcoming episodes, as per NASCAR and reported by Adam Stewart. This is something I'm not surprised to see. There are, I think, 3 episodes ago in Race for the Championship. I think this was episode 6 or 7 of the Race for the Championship. So it's not a major surprise. Of course, Kyle Busch has moved the RCR, one of the biggest silly season moves in NASCAR history, and Kurt Busch being out due to his concussion issues. And I would expect that they're probably also going to discuss Alex Bowman's concussion issues as well, among other issues with the next-gen car, probably in upcoming episodes of Race for the Championship. It gets people very intrigued to watch it, to see what kind of goes on behind the scenes, and I think Race for the Championship has been a very solid show. Good to see, though, that Race for the Championship will be addressing some of these issues and talking about some of these issues going forward. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Race for the Championship once again. As it was announced yesterday that NBC has agreed to start streaming Race for the Championship docuseries on Peacock, a boost to the prospects of the show, and that will begin here today. This is something that, I'll talk about this. This is something that should have been done from the get-go, and I will talk about why. Basically, the time when this show starts is 9 Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. Not only do you have the NFL Thursday Night Football going on, but you also do have other things going on. You've got the MLB playoffs that are kicking off, which they start today. You've got other things that are going on at the time, and it's a really bad time slot. Also, Race for the Championship, they had full episodes up on YouTube, and they ended up deleting them. This is something that should have been done from the get-go, because if you look at the TV ratings for Race for the Championship, they have been absolutely horrendous, and they have really struggled with Race for the Championship this year when it comes to the ratings, and it's just been bad. The first episode did bad, and one of the episodes, they did it basically during the Camp World Truck Series race, when all the people that your core audience that watches this show, they basically went in, and when they tuned into it, they were watching the truck race. So how are they supposed to tune into it when you have the truck race going on at the same time? But it's good that they're finally doing this. It's something that should have been addressed a long time ago, and if they're going to do Race for the Championship again next year, in my opinion, it needs to happen on Netflix or Amazon. People, I think, will tune into it more, and I think next year they need to stream it on Amazon, in my honest opinion. I think they really dropped the ball on this, and they should have started that from the get-go and from the beginning, but it is their decision if they want to do it. But at the same token, at the same time, in my opinion, they should have started streaming it on basically Peacock from the get-go. The fact they didn't is really frustrating, but it is what it is, and it is their decision, but they should have started streaming it from the get-go on Peacock. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 3F Racing. As it was reported from TobyChristie.com that 3F Racing is going to delay their Cup Series debut to 2023. They were supposed to make their debut this weekend at the Charlotte Roll, but they are going to delay when they will start, and the plan for 2023 is a run up to 10 races. No driver at this time has been announced for this team, but there have been rumors and speculation that Earl Bamber and Justin Allgaier could potentially be the 2 drivers that could get behind the wheel of the 3F Racing car going into next year. There's also been rumblings and rumors that 3F Racing has purchased the assets of NY Racing as well for 2023. Like I said, 3F Racing was supposed to make their debut starting this weekend, but I guess they didn't have all the parts ready to go. They, of course, are the first German racing organization to race in NASCAR's Cup division. So it is cool that there's a new team definitely coming in, no doubt about it. I know people feel like that this is a shady organization, and that's understandable, but they also could be a real team, and they could show up and could be a very successful organization. Who really knows? We've seen teams come out of nowhere and just be extremely successful. Look at Furniture Racing. They started it from nothing in 2005, and they came out of nowhere, and guess what? They won a championship. So 3F Racing could be the next team. I'm not saying they're going to be the next team like that, but who really knows at this point what could happen? That being said, though, it is really, really good to see that they're going to attempt next year. It sucks they're delaying to 2023, but I think if it means that their team can be more and more prepared for 2023, so be it. It's good to see that they're at least trying to come and race here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Santino Ferrucci. As it was announced yesterday that Santino Ferrucci is returning to IndyCar full-time in 2023 and will drive the 14 for AJ Foyt Racing. This is a massive, massive pickup, in my opinion, for AJ Foyt Racing. Santino Ferrucci, I think, is one of the most underrated drivers when he races in IndyCar. He has never finished outside the top 10 in the Indianapolis 500, and we've seen AJ Foyt Racing really need a driver that really could boost the confidence of this race team. With the loss of Kyle Kirk, with him going to Andretti Autosport heading into 2023, you need a driver who really is going to bring a boost of confidence. Benjamin Peterson, I think, is a driver that really will do really, really good. But I think with Santino coming over to team starting next year, I think that Santino is going to do extremely well in 2023. I think Santino is a really talented driver. I really think he is. I know he's a very controversial driver, but I think you look at Santino Ferrucci and his talent. I think his talent backs up some of the things he said in the past. I think he's a really, really talented driver. I think he absolutely deserves this opportunity, in my opinion, and congratulations to him on getting an opportunity to come back and race in IndyCar starting in 2023. I think he'll do really good with AJ Foyt Racing. I think he'll be the best performer AJ Foyt's had in years, probably since either when Tony Kanaan raced for the team or when Connor Daly raced for the organization. They need a driver who I think can really do good, and personally, I think that Santino is the guy that really could help the team really take that next major step to kind of get back to where they need to be, because let's be honest, they've really, really struggled, and they need a driver that can do that. I think that Santino Ferrucci is your go-to guy if you're going to have an opportunity to see it. So definitely for sure really, really exciting news. I'm looking to see what Santino can do in 2023. I think Santino will get some good finishes, and I think he's an underdog to get top 10 in points, and my seal will win here in IndyCar, but we'll have to see what happens. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, there was an Instagram comment that Kyle Busch left on Chandler Smith's post of him being announced to go to Kaulig Racing for 2023. And Kyle Busch weighed in on the Chandler Smith news and basically said, "Congratulations, Chandler. Good to see that you're able to make your own announcement before basically the media decided to announce it for me." That's really, really funny. Now, obviously, Kyle Busch is being referenced to the fact that basically his move was already announced like 2 or 3 days earlier that he was going to be driving the A car for Rich Schultz Racing heading into 2023. And Kyle Busch just seemed not very happy when it basically was announced. Now, I'm going to say this. I'm not going to blame any of the media members that basically reported on that story. They basically were announced these exclusive things. And the leakers, I blame the leakers for this, because I think the leakers are a big factor into these moves happening. And we kind of knew this was kind of happening with Chandler Smith already, considering the fact that we had a lot of people starting to leak that. And basically the leakers would basically reveal that, and sources will go and leak some of those news stories. But I do understand Kyle Busch's frustration. It's very understandable, and I get Kyle Busch's anger and frustration when it does come to something like that. I think when you look at a driver like Kyle Busch and what he's basically been able to do, I look at Kyle Busch and basically say, I get Kyle Busch's frustration. He'd be mad on the racetrack, but he's funny on Twitter and basically in social media. And his TikTok post about basically him racing and Xfinity, he said, "It's cool when I do it." That was a really, really funny thing. Kyle Busch has just been funny on social media the last couple weeks, and it's very interesting for sure. But I go ahead and blame the people who leaked this up and not the people who report on it. It's their job to report on that kind of stuff and get the scoop out. Whether drivers like it or not, that's kind of how it works, unfortunately. But I get Kyle Busch's frustration. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chandler Smith. As Chandler Smith was speaking to the media after it basically was announced to be going to Kaulig Racing, and he basically says he actually had a few options for 2023. And one of those options was Joe Gibbs Racing. Chandler Smith, of course, has been with TRD for many, many years. We already know the Kyle Busch Motorsports. They were announced that they will not be basically returned to Toyota, and they'll be going to Chevy, which means a lot of people who are in the TRD pipeline were probably going to be going over to Joe Gibbs Racing or jumping to another organization that we will talk about here in the not-so-distant future. It's very interesting that Chandler Smith decided to jump away from a Toyota pipeline, considering I think Chandler Smith is definitely one of Toyota's biggest prospects currently at the moment and a very talented driver. But I think a big reason why Chandler Smith made the conscious decision to jump away from Toyota is I think Toyota is really, really cutthroat. If you don't form a Toyota, you get cut instantly. You look at the history of Toyota, they've cut a lot of young drivers. Joey Logano, Eric Jones, Daniel Suarez, because they didn't perform as well, and they decided to go ahead and cut them early. I think Chandler Smith going over to Kaulig Racing, I think is a huge boost for Chevy. You think how good Chandler Smith is, and I think Chandler Smith is going to do a lot better driving for a team like Kaulig Racing. I really think not having that pressure to perform, and I think he'll make Kaulig a better organization than they've been. I mean, AJ's done good for the team, but I think he will be a really good replacement for AJ starting next year. I think Chandler Smith is a really talented and a really, really good driver. And honestly, I really do expect that Chandler Smith is going to do a lot of good things heading into next year. I think Chandler Smith is going to be extremely solid heading into 2023, and I expect that Chandler Smith is going to have a really strong year heading into 2023. I think he's going to do really, really good, and I'm excited to see that Chandler Smith will be driving for Kaulig. I think he'll do really, really good, and I expect good things for Chandler Smith heading into the 2023 season. Really looking forward to for sure to see that Chandler Smith will be driving for Kaulig Racing heading into 2023. Now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. It was basically revealed by Racer.com a few days ago that Kyle Busch will not run the Indianapolis 500 for Aaron McLaren SP for 2023. However, the driver that might be running the fourth Aaron McLaren SP car might end up being Tony Kanaan. Tony Kanaan, of course, has won the Indianapolis 500 back in 2013, who actually just finished in the podium position, finishing third in the 2022 Indianapolis 500, is likely right now the candidate to be in there instead of Kyle Busch. Obviously, a lot of fans like myself really do want to see Kyle Busch race in the Indianapolis 500. And we all thought that he was actually going to race Indy 500 this year. There have been a lot of talks and conversations that Menards was going to be the sponsor that was going to sponsor Kyle Busch. Now, does this mean that Kyle Busch is officially out of the Indianapolis 500 running to run it? Not necessarily, but it's not as likely as him running the Indy 500 as we think. The only place I really could see Kyle Busch maybe going next year for the Indy 500 might be Dry Rival Racing. That could be a possible option for Kyle Busch heading into 2023. Dreyer did get a top 10 finish in the Indianapolis 500. I believe it was with Sage Karam or Santino Ferrucci. Was actually up front competing for the win majority of the race. But I'm not sure if Kyle Busch really wants to compete for a team like Dry Rival Racing, who's a part-time organization. I think Aaron McLaren SP would have been a better organization. But I will say when it comes to them putting Tony Kanaan behind the wheel, Tony Kanaan is a very talented driver. Tony's a really good driver, still at the age of 47, will be 48 at the start of 2023. I think it makes sense to bring someone who does have that experience, who's raced. But man, I would have rather seen Kyle Busch race in it. Kyle Busch I think is a great driver. His brother Kurt finished sixth in his Indy 500 debut, and Jimmy Johnson was fast in his Indy 500 debut. Unfortunately, did end up crashing out of the Indy 500. Unfortunately, because he was having good pace in the practice sessions and stuff, but didn't finish really, really good. I don't think it's out of 100% out of the running that Kyle Busch will miss Indy 500. I still think there's a chance he could race in Indy 500 in the not-so-distant future. Hope he does run it this year. Man, it doesn't seem as likely as he's going to, but I don't think it's out of the 100% possibilities. I think Penske's probably going to go to another driver that we'll talk about here in the not-so-distant future, but Kyle Busch is likely not going to run in the Indy 500 in 2023, at least for McLaren. Very disappointing, but I understand they're going for a more experienced driver behind the wheel than a driver like Kyle Busch who's never raced in the Indy 500, but I would rather have Kyle Busch than Tony Kanaan, personally. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As mentioned in Jenna Fryer's tweet about Kyle Busch and Tony Kanaan basically being the two drivers that we just talked about a second ago, she mentions that Kyle Larson's name is once again back in the conversations to race in the 2023 Indianapolis 500, and the name has been gaining traction and steam to race in the 2023 Indianapolis 500. This is not the first time that Kyle Larson's name has been mentioned to run in the Indianapolis 500. There have been a lot of talks and conversations that he was maybe looking to run in the 2022 Indianapolis 500 for Team Penske. But unfortunately, those deals did not come through, and he did not race in the 2022 Indy 500. But it seems like his name, once again, is gaining steam and gaining traction to potentially run in the 2023 Indianapolis 500. Now, where would Kyle Larson race at? If he does race Indy 500, he's going to want to be in really competitive equipment. I see 2 or 3 organizations, really mainly 2 organizations, as a possibility, and they're 2 different manufacturers. The first team is Team Penske. Team Penske going into 2023 will have 3 full-time cars, that being Will Power, Joseph Newgarden, and Scott McLaughlin for 2023. But I obviously think there's also a possibility of them having a 4th car for 2023 in the Indy 500. And I think that ride would be reserved to a driver like, let's say, Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson, I think, is a very talented driver who, if you put him behind anything, he seems to be really, really fast and picks up the wheel very, very quickly. I think Larson would absolutely be big for the sport. Imagine him and Jimmy Johnson and even Kyle Busch all competing against each other. That would be really, really fun. It would be a great opportunity. The other organization that seems like a potential possibility is Chip Ganassi Racing. Some people have noted that Kyle Larson was sitting up on the Chip Ganassi Racing box. Now, that is associated with the Honda brand, which is against Toyota. But Kyle Larson, I don't think is affiliated 100% with any manufacturer. He's raced for different manufacturers. I think maybe when Ganassi was with Cadillac, I don't remember exactly. But I do think that Kyle Larson could, if he wanted to, he could race the Indy 500 for a team like Chip Ganassi Racing, who you know is going to be really, really quick. They just won the Indy 500 in 2022 with Marcus Ericsson, who almost won the championship in 2022. And I think Larson would absolutely be very, very competitive behind the wheel. I think the chance of Kyle Larson racing Indy 500 seemed pretty likely at this point, and I think it'd be fun for him to do the double. I think Larson would be very competitive. I think he could become the first person to win both races. I don't think we've seen anyone ever win both double races before, win the Indy 500 and the Coco 600 on the same day. That would be an incredible accomplishment if he's able to do that. So do I think he'll race Indy 500 2023? I think it's very likely at this point. With some of the people in the industry talking, I think there's a really good chance and a really strong possibility that Kyle Larson could race Indy 500 in 2023. I hope it does happen because I think it would be very, very big for the sport if he does race in the 2023 Indianapolis 500. Hopefully he does, but we'll have to wait and see for sure if he does decide to run in the Indianapolis 500. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about DJR Racing. Now, DJR Racing's behind the scenes has been in some conversations to potentially switch back their manufacturers. And it was reported a couple days ago on Wednesday by Kelly Crandall for Racer Magazine. She reports that DJR Racing is expected to switch back to Toyota in 2023. DJR Racing has formerly been with Toyota. They were with Toyota for many, many years, but they switched to Ford starting in 2019. I believe it's 2019 or 2020. They switched back to the Ford brand. Now, they are expected to be a 4-car organization, and they are expected to basically purchase the associates and basically the assets of Kyle Busch Motorsports' Toyota program. And right now, 3 drivers that are expected to drive for the team are Taylor Gray, Tanner Gray, and Corey Heim are all expected to basically drive for the organization heading into 2023. Now, obviously, the 4th car would then end up being a 4th organization. Basically, it would mean that they would be a 4-car team, truck team, heading into 2023 with the purchases and assets. DJR Racing is a team that currently is basically on the upswing currently at the moment right now. They're a team that I think would make a lot of sense for them to switch back, and it would be a major, major game. But it would also be a major loss for 2 drivers. Hailie Deegan and Ryan Preece are both part of the Ford development program. They're part of Ford's team. Ryan Preece being SHR's reserve driver, and with DJR used to being associated with Stewart-Haas Racing, they basically will no longer have that, and Preece more than likely will be looking to find a new place to go. Obviously, if Farmer Motorsports decides to basically expand to a 2-truck operation, I think Preece would be a great asset for that team. But then you also think about the fact that you have Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan, of course, she's making her NASCAR Xfinity Series debut here next weekend at Las Vegas. I think a big reason why she is making her NASCAR Xfinity Series debut is because they're trying to evaluate how she is going to do. Because if she does well in Xfinity, they're probably going to move her up in 2023. And I think it's very likely that she will move up in 2023 and go ahead and basically replace maybe Joe Graf Jr. and maybe move into that organization with SHR backing. Or she could go to SHR full-time in Xfinity next year, or Ryan Preece could. But I think that Ryan Preece and Hailie Deegan are going to be looking for new rides ahead to starting in 2023. I think it's something they're going to have to wait and see for sure what happens in regards to that. But DJR is expected to switch. I think DJR switching back to Toyota is something I did not have in the cards. I know some people have been asking what goes on with Todd Dillon if this move happens. Personally, I don't think this changes anything when it comes to Todd Dillon. I don't think this really impacts what goes on for Todd Dillon. Dillon has a contract at least through next year with Farmer Motorsports, and he's safe going into next year. But DJR will be switching to Ford, back from Ford to Toyota, starting in 2023, and it's expected to be announced in the coming days. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Dillon. Now, Ty Dillon very recently was on Sirius and NASCAR radio a couple days ago. It was reported from multiple reporters that Ty Dillon's plans for 2023, he says, will be announced in the upcoming days and weeks. Now, it's unclear how many more weeks it will be. It'll probably be the next 2 or 3 weeks before we find out where Ty Dillon will be driving heading into 2023. Ty Dillon, of course, will not be returning to Petty GMS Motorsports heading into 2023, as Noah Gragson is going to drive the 42 car for the organization starting in 2023, which means Ty Dillon will be looking for a ride. And Ty Dillon likely will not be returning to the Cup Series as well. So where will Ty Dillon end up driving? I think there's 3 or 4 big organizations that could be possibilities for Ty Dillon heading into 2023. Obviously, Kyle Busch Motorsports Truck Series program could be a possible option. I don't see that being as a favorite for where Ty Dillon will go. I think you're going to be looking at younger talent to go over there that's in the Chevy pipeline. I think that's a very possible option, though. He could go there. Another team is Big Machine Racing. Now, Big Machine Racing, they're not the favorites. I think they're going to be looking at a driver maybe outside the box, like a Trevor Bayne perhaps, who could go to that team. And maybe he goes to Colleague Racing. But at this point, it seems like Ty Dillon's future is probably going to be announced here in the next couple of weeks. Look, I don't think Ty Dillon is a bad driver. I think Ty Dillon is a very, very solid driver who has shown in the past that he can really prove himself and do really good in the series. I just think that Ty Dillon, he didn't do great with the 42 team. I'm going to be honest with you. He didn't do great with the 42 team. I think he's down a driver. Don't get me wrong. But I expect sometimes more from drivers, and I think Ty Dillon could probably prove himself at a better organization. I like Ty Dillon a lot. I think he's good, but he's not done fantastic in Cup, and I don't think he's really proven himself at points as well. That being said, though, I do hope Ty Dillon's able to find a ride heading into 2023, and hopefully it's a good enough ride to show his talent. He's young. He's only 31 years old, I think, or 30 years old, so he's still young enough to prove himself, but he's getting a little bit older, so hopefully he can start proving himself, because I think wherever he goes, and if it's a good team, it probably will be his last chance to get a really good opportunity to show his talent. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about William Byron. As it was announced yesterday that the penalties that William Byron received at Texas Motor Speedway have basically been overturned, and they basically got rid of all the penalties, well, not all the penalties, but they've gotten rid of all the points penalties that William Byron has received. Instead of having a basically $50,000 fine, he's basically doubled the penalty from the side of the money, but basically there's no points penalty that basically he got from the appeals panel, which means that William Byron now is sitting basically, instead of being 14 points below the cutoff line or 11 points below the cutoff line coming into this weekend at the Charlotte Roval, he is basically now 14 points above the cutoff line going into this weekend. Now, one thing to note that a lot of people have been talking about when it comes to this is that the appeals panel. The appeals panel is not associated with NASCAR. They're their own appeal. It's an independent appeal. But if you look at people on the appeal, they've got a short track promoter on this appeal. They've got a Chevy executive. And then, of course, they've got a TV executive. So, of course, it's not NASCAR doing this. I don't think NASCAR would 100% agree with the decision on this, but it's an independent appeal, and the independent appeal stands. And apparently, they can still appeal some of these penalties even more, which would absolutely be ridiculous and absolutely be foolish. After this, Chris Gabehart gave his thoughts on this last night on Sirius and NASCAR Radio, and basically said that the 11 team was the only team to basically end up getting basic penalties, which I agree with him on that in the situation where NASCAR did not step up. I'm going to give my thoughts on this whole situation. I 100% disagree with this call. While I will admit that I think the penalty might have been a little bit excessive, I think 25 points is a massive, massive penalty that William Byron did end up getting. I still think that he should not have gotten all his points back. Wrecking somebody under caution has always been frowned upon in NASCAR. And whether it was intentional or not, and I think it was somewhat intentional what William Byron did, it is still ridiculous. They basically penalize drivers for wrecking people under caution. Hell, Kyle Busch and Johnny Sutter have been suspended races for wrecking people under yellow. And I don't think what William Byron did was as bad as what those two drivers did. But still, it's been frowned upon for NASCAR history. If you wreck somebody under caution, you need to be penalized. And NASCAR didn't see it. Now, to be fair, people defending Byron saying, well, NASCAR should have seen it during the race. And you're right. NASCAR should have taken a look and basically said, we should have penalized him in the race. And the fact that they missed it is really, really bad. The same token, at the same time, you're setting a really dangerous precedent here by not basically handing William Byron one of the harsher penalties. Now, I will say maybe reducing the penalty a little bit, maybe down from basically 25 points down to maybe 15 points. I think that would have been a little bit more fair because I think basically 25 points was a little bit excessive. But now you also have basically given William Byron an opportunity to stay in the playoffs and put Denny Hamlin in a bad position. And if you look at Toyota, how they bet on the road courses this year, they have been absolutely horrendous. They have struggled on the road courses. And even Chris Gabehart mentioned this. They probably were going to be up there competing against Reddick for the win. They were going to take 2 tires. And they probably were going to be up there competing against Reddick for the win. So you affect the outcome. And Denny lost 20 spots because of this. And NASCAR screwed up. And yes, they should have taken care of this during the race. But at the same token, same time, Byron intentionally wrecked somebody under caution. And it's been frowned upon. Why are we rescinding penalties? It's ridiculous. It baffles me that we basically rescinded the whole penalty. I 100% disagree with NASCAR's decision on this. Look, I know NASCAR was not the one who made a decision. I know it's independent appeal who made a decision. But man, when I saw this yesterday, I was just so frustrated because I've seen other drivers get in trouble for this kind of stuff, and they should be penalized for this. And I'm not one of those conspiracy theorists who believes that Hendrick paid him off. I don't think Hendrick really paid him off here. I just think it's ridiculous that people running the appeal, they don't know anything about this kind of stuff. It's a TV executive is one of the people who's on this appeal board. It's like, are you serious? We're letting a guy who runs TV appeal the penalty? Of course they're not going to give him, they're going to rescind the penalties. But now you put Cindric and Briscoe in a bad box. You put those guys below the cutoff line, and those guys were on the cutoff line, and now you've made the cutoff line battle really not that fun anymore going into this weekend and just hurts a cutoff battle. Now, I will say the Roval's been always unpredictable, so probably we're going to see somebody screw up. But now you put other people in a really bad position, and I don't like it there. I do not like the fact that he got away with this quintessentially. I don't like it. Again, I would have given some points back maybe, but not would have given all the points back. It's ridiculous and excessive and just ridiculous that they've given him pretty much all his points back. I would have basically not given all of them back personally. I think it's ridiculous, and there has to be a precedent set because you basically have put these drivers in a position where you're basically going to have younger drivers looking. It's like, oh, we're not going to get penalized for wrecking somebody under caution. We're not going to get points penalties. $100,000 means nothing to these guys. $100,000 means jack squat. It means nothing. So I 100% expect them, basically, they should have been penalized 100% for that and kept their points penalties. Just, they need to officiate better, though. I agree with people saying that. It's just really frustrating that NASCAR let William Byron's team get away with this quintessentially. Yes, it didn't get rid of the dollars, but dollars really mean nothing, and Rick Hendrick can pay that, and he's got billions of dollars that he can pay. These guys make a lot of money. Should have gotten a points penalty, but it is what it is. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As Kevin Harvick and the 14 have been handed major penalties. Kevin Harvick has been penalized 100 driver points. Ronnie Childers has been fined $100,000 and it will have a 4-race suspension. And they will also receive 100 team points reducted as well. Now, why was Kevin Harvick's team penalized? Well, they receive an L2 penalty for messing with the single source part. Took a little bit for NASCAR to announce what that single source part was, but it was reported from Bob Pockers and multiple reporters, including Dave Moody, that basically they messed with the rear deck lid. This has been very controversial due to Kevin Harvick's basically being very outspoken in the sport. Now, basically, just a little bit ago, SHR announced that they would be going ahead and appealing the penalties that they did receive this past week, which I do not expect them to win the appeal considering they basically messed with the rear deck lid of the car. Look, this has been very controversial, and a lot of people believe that NASCAR was trying to silence Kevin Harvick, and basically this is an action detrimental to stock car racing. Steve Phelps basically came out and said that it's absolutely ridiculous. He disagrees with the fans. They're basically saying that NASCAR is just trying to penalize Kevin Harvick. Look, I understand how the fans feel, and it's a little weird that they did basically go after Kevin Harvick and penalize him. But here is the thing, and I'm going to say this. This rule has been in NASCAR since the beginning of the year. You're not supposed to mess with these cars. It's basically screw around and find out. If you mess in touch with these cars, you're going to be handed major penalties, plain and simple. And NASCAR said, appeal it if you feel like you were unjustifiably penalized, which they have penalized. They have justifiably went ahead and appealed the penalties, which they needed to if they feel like they were unjustifiably penalized. But NASCAR doesn't have vendetta against Kevin Harvick. That's what I don't understand for people. And again, I know the timing is weird, but Mark Truex Jr. has also been outspoken, and he didn't get penalized. He passed inspection and got through the R&D center. Basically, he didn't mess with the car, but if you notice, all the people that have been penalized this year, all been Fords. Brad Keselowski, 16. RFK Racing, they're 14. Michael McDowell, 30-14. They're 14. Now, one thing to note when it comes to appeal is that the crew chief for this weekend, the engineer for the 14, he will be crew chief in this weekend. So, Ronnie Childers, if they do end up losing appeal, he will be able to come back at Phoenix, but they're going to have him in there just in case. They're not going to have his whole team there. They're going to have the engineer there basically going right ahead and being right there. That being said, I understand fans being frustrated and upset with the appeal, but this has been, like I said, this has been a rule since the beginning of the 2022 season. And they basically said if you mess with the cars, you're going to be handed major penalties. I know it seems suspicious considering Kevin Harvick basically said it seems strange on his Twitter. And basically, Ronnie Childers said, shocker. But you can't mess with these cars. And basically, one of the reasons we have disqualifications now in NASCAR once again, and these major penalties coming into NASCAR, is because of the 14. Remember, back in 2018 at Texas Motor Speedway, Kevin Harvick's team won, but they were handed a major encumbered penalty for messing with the rear of the car, and they basically lost a lot of driver's points. They still kept the win, but were not able to use it to get into the championship four. And really, I think it would cost them a championship because they lost their crew chief, Ronnie Childers, and they had Tony Gibson crew chiefing for Kevin Harvick during that day. The 4 team has always been known to bend and break the rules. So, of course, if you mess with NASCAR's car, you're going to get penalized. They don't want these teams getting a bit. Now, some people thought it was the rear body of the car that they messed with, but it's not. Again, I just don't think NASCAR would just go after Kevin Harvick. Now, I get people thinking that because Denny Hamlin backed off and Kevin Harvick basically never backed down. But I think Denny Hamlin backed down also because he didn't really 100% clarify who he's going after. He basically had to clarify saying that, oh, it was Steve. Basically said, Steve Phelps, I've got no problem with him. It was other people that he really did have a problem with. But like I said, I'm going to say this. I do not personally believe that NASCAR has a vendetta against Kevin Harvick. Like I said, if you mess with these cars, you're going to get penalized straight up. And they basically mess with the car. And like I said, these teams have been told that they are going to get penalized if you mess with the car. And this has been happening 3 times this year. NASCAR does not have vendetta against Kevin Harvick. I saw so many people saying that they have vendetta against Harvick. And again, I understand how people feel and the conspiracy theorists feel, but I do not believe, and NASCAR themselves has really a vendetta against Kevin Harvick. I get the frustration for the fans and how they feel, and that they weren't really transparent, and that reporters had to be transparent, basically come out and say it. Some people thought maybe they messed with the rear deck lid because of the safety of the car, but they wouldn't mess with the rear deck lid. They were using it to basically get an aero advantage. I know they finished 29th in the race, and it seems suspicious, but I don't think NASCAR has a vendetta. I know Steve Phelps said that we don't have a vendetta, and again, I believe they don't have vendetta against Kevin Harvick, despite him being a very outspoken driver recently. They don't got a vendetta against Kevin Harvick. Why would they have vendetta? That'd be so stupid and action detrimental stock car racing. They have other drivers, they've been penalized. And they would go after Denny Hamlin for it, because if they were going to go after anybody first, it'd be Denny Hamlin. Denny Hamlin has been absolutely the most outspoken driver when it comes to this, so they would go out after him. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and I don't believe NASCAR just went after Kevin Harvick for the sake of penalizing Kevin Harvick. They messed with the car, and they got penalized for it. End of story. So anyway, that is your today's long NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Notifications on to be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and for me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below over that. And comment below your thoughts on today's video. Do you think NASCAR has a vendetta against Kevin Harvick or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about William Byron's penalty being overturned by NASCAR? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Xfinity race review from the Charlotte Roval. And then Sunday, we'll have the Cup review from the Charlotte Roval. Monday, more than likely, we are going to have a NASCAR news video and a motorsports video. We'll have to wait and see. Then Tuesday, we'll have race picks for the upcoming weekend at Las Vegas. And we've got other content that is on the way as well for you guys. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.